This video may contain spoilers for the stories behind the Disney songs. Please enjoy! Hey Artemis, sorry. Hello folks, this is Dragon Videos, and if you're wondering what I was crying about this time, well, I had to go over the list of some of the saddest songs in the Disney franchise. That's right, instead of doing characters or certain cartoons, I decided to make a list of songs this time around. And in particular, I decided that this should be the top 10 saddest Disney songs, more specifically in Disney movies. Now, as you all know, Disney is notorious for good songwriting, more or less. It always has so many songs that always make you tap your toes or sympathize with everything else that goes on and leads you on to the story. In this list, I'm going over some of the most heart-wrenching songs in the Disney franchise that make you so sad up to the point where you would wonder when the tears would never end. So grab a tissue, make sure you blow your nose, and get ready for the saddest Disney songs in existence. Now, I did kind of pick this one because it's more up to date than some of the other contestants I've had, but I also had to bear in mind that with this Disney villain song, you kind of have some sadness for the character. Anyway, Audrey wasn't exactly the nicest person we saw in the first Descendants movie, but yet at the same time, when you go through what has been happening in the past 3 movies, you would understand why she grows very bitter toward Mal. All her life, Audrey would be told she would be married to Ben. Then Mal comes in and starts dating Ben, and over time, the two, Audrey and Ben, grew apart, and Mal got engaged to the boy she was promised to marry. So of course, she gets really upset about this, and finally believes that if she can't have what she was promised, even if she was a good person, she was better off as being a villain in the process, gaining the crown and Maleficent's scepter, so you can understand the consequences that came with it. So I put this number 10 because in some ways the song is a bit relatable to real life. We have a lot of good people who suffer emotional and painful stress from what's been going on, such as breakups and such, that they just reach a breaking point. And it's hard to crawl from it. It just feels like no matter how good of a person you are, bad things will still happen to you. And sometimes those bad things are really hard to bounce back from, which is why I put this at number 10. Now, unlike Audrey, Mal didn't exactly have a very good childhood growing up on the Isle. You see, she's Maleficent's daughter, so of course being raised by a villain doesn't exactly have great positive experience for her, and the concept of love is very far-fetched. However, when she goes to Ordon with her friends, she starts to learn more about herself as her own person, as well as meeting Ben, who generally loves her as an individual more than just some random villain who's just gonna take things as she wishes. As a result, if only, this gives her a concept of how she's torn, being her own person or following her mother's orders, which is definitely a song that we can all relate to at one point in our lives. So in terms of Aladdin, he was always considered a street rat, and everyone always gave him a hard time, regardless if you were a rich prince or if you were just a regular townsfolk. Aladdin was always considered the street rat, someone who is callous, uncaring, and someone who deserves to die. And that's horrible as it sounds. With the rephrase, you can't help but feel bad for Aladdin at this point. He feels like he has to be a prince to get respect and love from everyone else. And this definitely highlights more about Aladdin's character, that he is a kind soul. He's just a misunderstood guy who just tries to survive like everyone else. Even in the live-action remake of One Step Ahead, the rephrase, he has it twice, but it definitely highlights more of his conflicting feelings of telling the truth, even if it means losing Jasmine forever. For many of you who are asking, no, I did not put this on the list because of a remake. But Reflection is a pretty good sad song. Anyway, it focuses on Mulan's troubles after she had a disastrous attempt of oppressing the matchmaker. But let's face it, that woman wouldn't get dated to save her soul. Anyway, Mulan became upset because of who she is. She wants to provide honor to her family, but she's smart and very skilled compared to that of regular Chinese women. Plus, she's the only child in that family, which makes it even more depressing. Unlike Mao, who was struggling of being a villain or being her own person, Mulan is trying to overcome some of her society's pressures of being the traditional woman and the traditional bride. She has to give up everything in order to bring that tradition. But I felt like in the extended version of Mulan, it could have kept "They want a docile lamb, no one knows who I am." This alone would have made the song even more heartbreaking. But the reason why I put this further down the list is because unlike Aladdin, Mulan really struggles of her own self-love and viewing herself as someone who is capable and worth loving as a person. Okay, let's face it, Quasimodo is a precious cinnamon roll that just deserves better. But in this movie, he just can't seem to cut a break. You see, towards the tail end of the movie, Esmeralda returns to the cathedral to help Phoebus get back on his feet. And in doing so, they begin to develop a more romantic connection. And of course, this kind of crushes Quasimodo because he has strong feelings for Esmeralda. And can you blame him? He's been alone for practically 20 years of his life, and he finally found one person who likes him for who he is despite his disfigurement. And he feels like now he's just someone who is not worth loving. Same with Reflection and One Step Ahead rephrase. But I put this further down on the list because unlike Mulan and Aladdin, who are lucky enough to have a few group of people to appreciate them, Quasimodo had no one. Just the gargoyles, which really makes it all the more upsetting. My first thought with the Ernesto version, Remember Me kind of came off as like this classy Broadway that comes off as a simple farewell until we meet again sort of deal. However, after learning you the truth of what really happened with Remember Me, you can't help but want to cry. This is basically the origin of it when you learn that Hector originally made his song for Coco, Remember Me being a special reminder for Coco to always remember her father. And of course, in return, that song, ironically, is learned by Miguel, and thus bringing back those memories that were long since buried for such a long time. What makes the song so sad is that you learn that Hector lost his life and was unable to meet his daughter for one last time. And I will not lie, I was practically crying in both the reunion version as well as the lullaby version because of the situation that comes with it. Again, Hector was betrayed by Ernesto, and all Hector wanted was to go back home to his family. And because of Ernesto's greed, he was nearly forgotten by everyone. Hector couldn't just get a break. And because of that, Remember Me became one of the most memorable as well as saddest songs in Disney franchise. Okay, I kind of admit that Jack and Sally are kind of one of my favorite couples. I wish we've seen more of them in the Disney franchise. So Sally does have feelings for Jack and really cares about him. And she has some issues of voicing out her reasoning against the idea of trying to use a Christmas-Halloween mashup because she saw of the horrible consequences that came with it. When Jack went off and vanished into the sky to do his Christmas thing, Sally was alone and sad because she wasn't sure if she would ever have feelings being returned to Jack. In the end, they did so, but I couldn't help but put this further up on the list because Sally is upset at the fact that she may never see Jack again, as well as the possibility that she may never have his feelings for her returned in the process. And this is why I put it at number 4, because of that heartbreaking sense of relationship, as well as the unrequited love. Yes, my dear friends, this is one of my favorite songs in the Beauty and the Beast 2017 version. So many of you have already know that the prince came off as a bit of a jerk, a super under-conceited jerk. Anyway, this resulted in him being a beast that he thought was unloving and not worth being loved. And upon letting Belle go after their dance, my favorite part in this was just the icicle scene before the zoom in between him and the rose, where it emphasized his loneliness that he feels when Belle left the room in general, and possibly out of his life forever. So you see, in the song Evermore, he begins to reflect of how Belle is a part of him, just helping him become comfortable in his own skin and help him become a better person. Thinking about her feelings, recognizing her as being an intelligent person instead of some woman who just randomly kept in prison. And upon letting her go, realizing that her happiness was worth more than his, he reflects on the fact that he'll still love her even if he may never have that love again in return, which is why I put it at number 3. Okay, this film deserves so much love, and I put this song at number 2 because it's just an underappreciated treasure. So you see, in Pooh's Grand Adventure, The Search for Christopher Robin, Pooh and friends find themselves lost in the mist and decide to hide out in the cave. And we all know that Pooh was still feeling down on himself in doing so and felt like he may never see Christopher Robin again. This is definitely a heartbreaking time just listening to the melodies and the piano. You see, with Winnie the Pooh, wherever you are, Pooh begins to think of the fact that he may never see his friend again, even though we all know that he may not be gone. Just the mere thought of never seeing your friend or beloved one again, and the way that the tune is set up, you would never even think of that. You would think that Christopher Robin had died and that Pooh was left alone dealing with a sense of grief. And this song is a lot of ways relatable. And if you don't think it's on number 2, go look it on YouTube. I dare you. Many of you would not find this as a big surprise. You see, this was number 1 for a reason. In the beginning, Jessie was strangely giddy and had a lot of issues with being kept in a box for so long. But upon learning about her past, we definitely become a little bit more sympathetic to her. We learn that she was once belonged to a girl named Emily, and through the years she was her faithful companion. Unfortunately, kids grow up and of course they start to have a distant relationship with their toys. So of course, when Jessie thought she was getting Emily back in her life, she was put into the donations. Now we all know that maybe Emily wasn't trying to hurt Jessie's feelings on purpose, but yet at the same time, there was that sense of betrayal and loneliness that Jessie felt up to the point where she didn't feel like wanting to go on anymore. So When She Loved Me was so popular that it was practically used in the ASPCA advertisement. I kid you not, but it didn't change the fact that it was considered a very sad Disney song because not only was it dealing with Jessie's feelings of betrayal, but it was also the loneliness and the years of being that unlovable person for such amount of time, which is why it's considered the number 1 saddest Disney song. Well folks, that's a wrap for me. Stay tuned for any other items I may bring. Feel free to do comment, subscribe. This is Dragon Videos, signing out.